Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with another homeowner association story. In this video, an HOA Karen claimed that she has documents that prove that my house belongs to her and thus she had it demolished. And I honestly could not be more upset. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. So this happened a while back, but since HOAs still seem to suck and Karens are an even bigger issue now than in the past, I will tell this story. So I lived in an area that was actually a pretty quiet and somewhat dead kind of neighborhood. We did not really have kids out riding bikes or people talking in the street. We just kind of minded our own business and things seemed to move slow. The only active thing was the HOA. They were big on their rules and like everybody else, I did my best to follow them, but seemed to mess up once or twice. And of course, things happen that are just totally out of my control that I cannot help. Like this one time, I slept in and my trash cans were out for hours after pickup on a very windy day. One just got knocked over and rolled into the street. The HOA was not happy about me creating a potential safety hazard and gave me a big fine for that one. Despite all that, I would not say I hated the HOA, I just wish they would maybe relax a little bit. Like they always seem to just need a drink and to chill out. Karen was my neighbor across the street and relatively new to the neighborhood. She had been there over a year, but that's still considered new when most people tend to stay put around here. She did not fit in with the rest of the people on the block and it was obvious right away. She was big into gossip and finding out what was going on with everybody and their personal lives. I had good relationships with my neighbors, but we never talked about that kind of stuff. She also was typically entitled, hence the name Karen. None of that was the worst part about her though. No, it had to be that she was more obsessed with the HOA rules than the actual HOA itself was, which I did not think was possible. Now, she was not on the HOA board, but she had basically anointed herself as an unofficial board member. The minute she saw something against code, she would run and tell them like a dog, thinking they would get a treat. She had made so many complaints against me to the HOA that I had lost track of them all. The smallest things she would turn into a total disaster. That was the end of the world. One of my bushes needed to be trimmed and she acted like my entire property was a jungle or something. She was the queen of making a mountain out of a molehill, and I think even the HOA did not want to deal with her crap. I knew when a complaint she made against me got ignored by the HOA because I would find a letter from Karen herself on the issue. She was so deluded that she was actually trying to write me fines like she had any type of power. And it just went on for over a year with every tiny thing being a complaint. I had a lawn ornament that was not in the best shape anymore after a storm. I got reported. My mailbox being blue? I got reported. Setting up a chair and sitting in my front yard? Reported. She was the most unreasonable, unstable person that I'd ever met. When I got my vacation time off work, I could not have been more excited to get away from everything and especially a week away from Karen. Even when she was not reporting me, she was giving me dirty looks and being her neighbor was just exhausting. A week away was just what I needed and at the end of it I was feeling refreshed and fantastic. Until I got back to my house, or the pile of dirt and rubble that used to be my house. There was a construction fence around it so I couldn't even get on the property. I had no idea what happened, but I did see Karen standing across the street with a smug look on her face. I knew that she had everything to do with this and went over to see how she managed to do this. Before I could get a single word out, she flashed some papers in front of my face far too quickly for me to read. Me, what are those? Karen, papers stating that I'm the rightful owner of that property. The land is mine now, so you're just going to need to find out somewhere else to go live. Me, I was only gone for a week. How did you manage to steal my property? Karen, I did not steal the property. I went through our great court system with my papers showing that you had fake ownership of the property. The house was destroyed via a court order, so don't even try to claim this is not legal. I was furious but trying to keep my cool because I knew the minute I yelled I was not going to get any more of the information out of her. Me, may I see the papers? Karen, of course, you can bask in my victory. But only for a moment because I have places to be. In the minute or two that I was able to see the papers, I could see that they were actually fake, and if I'd been around to defend myself, I would have been able to prove that to the court. So for one thing, it had my signature on the paperwork, which was not even close to how I signed my name. The papers basically stated that I had given Karen my property, she claimed I was living on it illegally, and the paperwork I had filed was not valid. I also noticed one very important detail on the papers that I knew was going to help me once I could speak to a lawyer. I could not see much else because she took them back. But her being so full of herself to let me see them at all was going to be the reason that I managed to nail her for fraud. I went to the police station to try and get them to look into things, and they were a bit reluctant at first. They saw the court order and did not want to deal with what they assumed was a sore loser. Then I explained the issues with the paperwork, and the fact that I was really calm and polite probably helped. They launched an investigation into Karen, and I managed to get a lawyer and get a court date to re-evaluate the paperwork. I was filing a lawsuit against Karen for fraud, theft of property, and destruction of property since she destroyed my house and everything in it. Even if it was via a court order, it was her fake paperwork that started all of it. So we got into court and Karen just showed off the paperwork and the fact that it was signed off by the other judge. My lawyer wanted to ask one simple question, and that was, how did I manage to sign over my property to Karen on the date mentioned in the papers when I had not even opened my mortgage on the house until 2 years after that date? And yes, I know this was an oversight on the court system, but I think we all know that they miss and mess things up all the time. Now, the judge was interested in what Karen was saying and the fact that her paperwork was looking more fake by the minute. In the end of that, Karen was determined to have forged the paperwork and knowingly allowed my property to be destroyed due to her actions. She was going to owe me a lot of money that I did manage to get and use to rebuild my house. But that is far from the most interesting thing about Karen. I don't know the details of it, but I know that criminals tend to jump around states to do things because there is, or was at the time, a lack of a connecting system. So a criminal could jump to another state and commit a crime without ending up on a police radar as being a criminal. Once she was under a full investigation though, her entire past was dug up and the stuff they found out about her was insane. She started out as a lot of fraud people do, running pyramid schemes. What was a little different with her was she realized that she didn't need to stick around until things started to crumble. She got as much money from people as quickly as she could and then she left without a trace, usually using a fake name so that she could not even be properly reported. When she got caught doing that in one state, she decided to jump to another in order to start fresh. I guess she started getting bolder because she had started to do bigger fraud deals where she would steal people's identities and scam people out of their property. I don't know if she used the same method she did with me or something else, but it explained how she had a ton of money and never seemed to be working. She was just a scam artist, but on such a larger scale than anybody would have thought. She was in some serious legal trouble with several states and the federal government. I did not want her shame to be exclusive to the court system and police, so I decided to go online with it. I went to local papers and news outlets so I could share my story and warn people that they could be in danger and not know it. To be careful about scams, and that because of her, I had lost my entire house. I got a ton of support from people, but what I enjoyed the most was the fact that more people were coming out admitting they got scammed and giving descriptions of the person that matched Karen. The federal case against her was getting worse for her and better for everybody else. You can bet that she went to prison, and if she ever gets out there, she will probably be very old at that point. As for my house, I used the money to build a bigger and better house in that same spot. Insurance covered a lot of my destroyed valuables as well, but of course some things just cannot be replaced. I'm looking on the bright side, and after all this time, don't get too upset thinking about it anymore. I just remember where Karen probably still is and enjoy the fact that she is in prison. Or if she ended up thinking the guards were like the HOA and started reporting to them, she might have ended up in an even worse type of scenario. Speaking about the HOA, they also ended up getting a bit of a bad reputation just because Karen kept talking about them and making them seem like she was part of them. They tried to distance themselves but kind of failed at it. They've been a lot more relaxed in what I think is an attempt to try and make people not think they are evil or the same as Karen. Edit. Some people in the comments were confused as to where this story took place. I will give some insight, but not too much, since I don't want to get doxed or reveal too much of my personal information. This story did not take place in the United States. I'm from a poor country in South Asia, and the court system here can be incredibly corrupt and broken, just like the general state of our society as well as the government. Furthermore, our HOAs are not exactly called HOAs, but they are extremely similar to the ones in Western countries and also full of corrupt idiots. And the next one is a story posted by user cleancore6582 on r/ripe stories, and it is an Am I the A-hole story. So for a bit of background, I'm a former army ranger. I joined the army after the 9/11 attacks and immediately went into special forces. I was deployed to Afghanistan after training and served for 5 years. Sadly, I was shot in the head, but my helmet slowed the bullet enough for me to live. However, my memory was not so intact. As a medic, I could not afford to forget things. I got an honorable discharge and came back to the States with a Purple Heart and a handful of ribbons in my name. Now when I got back I purchased a 9mm pistol. A few days later, while at my house that I worked hard to get, my door was kicked open. In charges 2 armed men. Because of PTSD, I always feel the need to have my gun on or within arm's reach of me. I grabbed the gun and shot both of them, killing one. After the survivor recovered, his lawyer sent me a letter. And guess what? I am being sued for attempted murder. Seriously, this case is basically one already for me. There's no way I can get convicted when they kick down my door. So was I the a-hole here? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know whether you think OP was the a-hole in this situation or not. Update to the story: if you read the original post, you would know that I'm currently being sued for attempted murder. However, I took the advice of a commenter and talked to a lawyer. He said that he will help me out and that there's no way we can lose. I'm looking for a settlement of the price of a new door, costs for emotional trauma, PTSD issues that arose, and he will probably go to jail. Thanks, commenter. I did not have the guts at first, but now I won't back down. As they say, Rangers lead the way. Update number 2. So I took the advice of a commenter, talked to a lawyer, and I am counter-suing. Looks like I got a good chance to win. Reimbursements for my door, PTSD issues that cost me a therapy session a few minutes ago, and a jail sentence for the guy. Update number 3. Literally the first day and last day of my burglar's attempted lawsuit was dropped almost immediately, and his evidence was basically a confession. Seriously, he used the gunshot wound and medical bills as well as my neighbor's cameras. He literally showed himself kicking down my door as evidence against me. Yesterday I countersued and won $359 for my door, $7,850 for my PTSD therapy, and $2,361 for my legal fees. I did not back down, and thank you for the support I have received. By the way, most people in my neighborhood avoid me because of my flashbacks, thinking I'm a danger to them due to what happened at New Year's Eve party. Not going into details, but someone got hurt. People seem to hate me for my service, but I've seen that the people I fought for are not all haters. Anyway, thank you for helping me with all of this. I hope I don't have to post here again, but if I do know, I can count on all of you to tell me if I'm the a-hole or not. And the next one is titled, Karen tried to not allow me in the supermarket/grocery store on my local Air Force base, posted by user NoCOD989 on r/ripe stories as well. So this took place when I was 11 or 12 during the pandemic and when people are in stores with masks. For a bit of background, I'm from a military family, and you will see why this is important, because you cannot get on military bases without a military ID or buying a temporary pass. Also, at the age of 10, you're allowed to get that ID if a military family member like your dad or mom lets you get one with them as your sponsor. So anyway, what happened was I was on Lackland AFB Air Force Base with my family when we head to the supermarket/grocery store there. When we got into the store, 2 people were checking for IDs to allow people in. Note that I didn't get one until I was about 14, so I didn't have one at the time, and I have a baby face, so I'm mistaken for a 9 to 8-year-old at that time. This is also a basic rundown as I have a bad memory. My dad, she doesn't have one yet, but she's with her parents, which is okay. Karen, how old is she? My mom, she is 11 to 12. Karen, then she needs an ID to be allowed in. My dad, no she doesn't, she's with her parents. Now another thing is that the other person is a military personnel. And yes, that's right, the man next to her was also telling her that it's fine because I'm with my parents. She kept arguing for a good few minutes before the military personnel said we can go. I don't know what happened next, but I believe she got put in place by the military personnel that just because I don't have an ID and I'm with my parents does not mean I'm not allowed in the market. The next one is a petty revenge story, and it starts like this. I was waiting at the elevators, did not take too long since my apartment building is not that big. I get inside, and right when the door closes, a hand pushes through. She looked like your typical middle-aged Karen. She presses the 17th floor and she takes one look at my floor, which was on the 2nd. She scoffs, glares at me and says, "The 2nd floor? Really?" Did not take much to piss me off. Her comment was so unnecessary and uncalled for. Who cares if it was the 2nd floor? It's my decision whether to take the stairs or not. I just finished an overnight shift and I was exhausted. I guess my exhaustion made me extra moody because when I reached my floor she was scrolling through her phone. I quickly ran my hands through as much buttons as I could and said, "Have fun, Karen," right when the door closes. And because I was extra exhausted, therefore extra moody and petty, I pressed the up button when the elevator barely reached the 3rd floor, so I can use the other elevator and press a bunch of buttons again to further inconvenience her just in case she needed to get off on the 3rd floor to take the other elevator. Take the stairs then, if it is not that big of a deal. Just don't be rude to your neighbor for riding the elevators to the 2nd floor. You don't know if they are exhausted or if they have non-visible health conditions that make it hard for them to take the stairs. The next one is another petty revenge story, and it starts like this. My next door neighbor is a Karen who recently adopted a few dogs. At first there was no issue, but then my driveway and lawn started getting more and more dog crap. Everyone who has dogs is very good at picking up after their pets, except for Karen. She denies it is her dog despite security footage showing it is clearly her and her damn dogs. The dogs are not trained well, Karen does not use leashes because they are barbaric, and sadly there is no law where we live about dogs being on leashes. She also put them on vegan diets, which is clearly not doing well for the dogs. Karen also leaves the dogs in her backyard and they bark at everything. We tried calling the police, but they don't do anything. The entire neighborhood is fed up with her. One day another neighbor is having a barbecue and the aroma wafts over to her house. Karen gets pissed and heads over to the neighbor's house and gives them a lecture about animals and other stuff. At this point we all have had enough of Karen's holier-than-thou attitude. 7 homes surrounding Karen decided to make Karen's days from this point on miserable. Since it is summer and we are all stuck at home, we all decide to start cooking outdoors. Some homes purposely get barbecue grills and smokers. I myself turned my fire pit into kitchen number 1. Every day at least one of us is cooking some glorious meat dish and the aroma goes straight to Karen's home. I try to cook at least one thing outside, especially if it is extra aromatic. We all have plenty of wood thanks to our neighbor, who recently took down a dead tree and gave everyone wood. A lot of wood. Karen complains and even tries to call the police, but obviously we are doing nothing wrong. I just got some brisket to smoke for 16 hours and my other neighbor plans to roast an entire pig. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I wanna start this story off by saying that I've always been a respectful person and would never go out of my way to sue someone, especially my neighbor, if I did not feel like I was forced to. But boy, did he piss my wife off, and I'll admit I was mad too, but she was fuming. We live on a large lot with several lateral water lines present on my property that belong to my surrounding neighbors. Not only does my property include the lateral water lines, but there is a small utility easement as well that runs south to north on the east side of my property. That's not a big deal, and in the past my south-facing neighbor had to come onto my land to have his water line repaired, only he talked to me first and made sure to do it the right way. That was not what happened with our other neighbor to the west though. That neighbor also had issues with his lateral water line breaking. The pipes were old and this happens after 50 years, so it is no surprise. Only the big surprise to me was the way that he chose to handle it. This man had owned a minor construction/handiwork company for many years and kept small excavators and backhoes in his barn. No big deal until he decided to just plow through my property with his machinery to access the utility easement. The trench was huge and I had no idea how my yard would ever look the same afterwards. My property was pretty big, my backyard alone was at least an acre, and there were dozens of trees, young and old, along with several other plants and nature located in the back part of my yard. I'm sure to him he always felt like it was overgrown, but I kept the brush to a minimum and I enjoyed watching the wildlife that lived in it while I had my morning coffee. My wife especially loved to watch over the little family of cardinals that she had been feeding and providing houses for almost a year. I was somewhat aware that something had happened to his water line when I saw plumbing trucks come and go over a 24-hour period. Then I caught him meandering around my property early the next morning, apparently looking to see where he could dig. When I saw this, I thought it would be a good idea to talk to him for my own curiosity and my property's protection, but when I came back after changing into normal clothes, he was already gone. Nothing seemed to be going on for a few days, so I nearly forgot about it, but that was until Friday rolled around. My wife and I started our day like usual, having our breakfast and coffee before leaving for work. That afternoon, my wife arrived home first, and what she found in the backyard was devastating. She called me on my way home, crying with rage. She said that our neighbor had taken his excavator and dug a huge trench through our yard, demolishing most of the wooded area and the nearly 30 trees that were present. Even after seeing the wreck that was our yard, her biggest concern was her little family of cardinals whose birdhouse was tossed carelessly to the side. I was in shock, and even more so when I actually laid eyes on the mess. Still, to this day, I have a hard time understanding his thought process. Why would you not speak to me first? Anytime I asked, he did not care. I confronted him once I arrived home. He was working with several other men, assuming his employees. When I asked him what he was doing, he seemed to casually brush me off, almost like I was simply an annoyance at the moment. When I pointed out that this was my yard and he had no right to dig a giant trench through it, he shrugged his shoulders and told me that this was a prescriptive easement and he had rights to access it to fix his water line. Firstly, why don't you fix your water line instead of going out of your way to hook it up to this other utility easement? When I asked this, he told me that I would have to call a lawyer if I wanted to do anything about it. There was not much talking to him, as he felt like he understood the laws and I didn't. However, I was not afraid to give him crap for his poor neighbor etiquette. You could not at least talk to me first? Shake my hand maybe? Nope, not worth it according to him. He claimed that legally he had rights to do this to my yard and he did not see the point in wasting his time getting my permission. When I mentioned that maybe he could have done it out of common courtesy, he actually laughed at me. I told him to go F himself and that he would hear from my lawyer. I'll admit it was probably a line I had heard in movies, but it still felt good to say it. When I contacted a lawyer, they were quick to tell me all of the things I needed to make our case. One of the first things was to have the land appraised, as well as an arborist to give cost on the trees that he had cut down. I had no idea how much money trees cost, but when I mentioned how many were destroyed by his excavation, the lawyer nearly jumped for joy. Apparently, trees cost a ton of money, especially when you have over 24 mature oak and cherry trees. After gathering more documents on my deed and the city's utility lines were identified along with the easement, we were finally able to go after him. From my lawyer's research and the information we were getting from his lawyer, we discovered that the claim of a prescriptive easement was unfounded, considering he had never used the land until he chose to excavate it. The so-called easement by necessity was almost valid, but the fact that he chose to begin his work without actually communicating with the water company really hurt him. In court, he did stand a chance. The judge was somewhat sympathetic to him needing to repair his water lines, only she said that he did not approach it in the correct manner. She really laid into him, asking him why he felt like he had the right to destroy my property without even speaking with me first. Ha! Does not pay to be a douchebag anymore, does it? While my neighbor knew that I would be suing him for the damages, he did not realize that I would be including the cost of the trees too. I was actually floored by the arborist's estimate of how much the trees were, amounting to almost $400,000. And yes, you heard that right. I could not believe it. When my lawyer handed over the arborist's paperwork to the judge, the look she gave my neighbor was almost one of pity. Well, if you were not in trouble before, here's the total bill for the mature trees you cut down. My neighbor's face was pale and I thought he would faint after hearing the number. Instead of offering to pay him that full monetary amount, I suggested that he could pay some of it back by performing yard work and planting new trees and vegetation where he had run through everything. He almost looked annoyed that I had suggested it, but what is he going to do? Pay back $400K? In the end, he did have to give us around $250,000, but the rest he swore he would pay us back in physical work. I was surprised that he stuck to his word, coming over weekly to cut the grass, weeding the flower beds and planting various different shrubs and trees in the yard. My wife even had him hang up the birdhouses he had ripped down and thrown into our yard without a care. This went on for an agreed amount of time, which was about 6 years. As soon as the contract was up, he immediately moved, never spoke to us again. Maybe he has learned his lesson about being a crappy neighbor. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.